I thought I was doing what a good husband does, showing up, paying the bills, keeping the peace. Then one afternoon at Texas Medical Center, I heard my mother-in-law whisper to a nurse, "Don't let him know, he's just the name on it." That sentence cracked everything open. Because when I started digging, I realized my kindness wasn't being appreciated, it was being used. And the worst part? It wasn't just about money, it was about my son. If you've ever been betrayed by the people closest to you, you'll want to hear how this ends. And if you're here for real stories like this, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. That day started like 100 others. My shift at Station 17 ran long. Small kitchen fire, then a wreck on I-45 where we had to cut a door off to get a guy out. By the time I clocked out, my shirt clung to my back and my knees felt older than 44. Still, I didn't go home first. I drove straight to Texas Medical Center because that's what I'd been doing for weeks. Show up, handle it, keep things moving. Danielle had texted me while I was still on the engine. Don't forget Mom needs her insurance papers signed today. And pick up the groceries on your way back. You're the only one who can get this done. No please. No, how was your day? Just instructions like I worked for her. I told myself she was stressed. Her mother was sick. That's what husbands do, right? Carry the weight when it gets heavy. Patricia had always been the same with me. From the beginning, she talked like I was lucky to be in her family, like my job and my paycheck were supposed to prove I deserved a seat at their table. Even after Danielle and I got married, she never called me Malcolm. It was always son-in-law or him, like I was a role, not a person. But I stayed calm. I stayed respectful, mostly because of my boy. 12 years old, sharp as a tack, watching everything. I grew up with a father who disappeared. I swore my son would never have to wonder if his dad was coming back. So I made peace when I didn't want to. I swallowed words when they burned. That afternoon, I carried a paper bag of Patricia's favorite peach tea and a clean set of pajamas Danielle had tossed at me before I left the house. I walked through the hospital like I'd done it all my life, nodding at the security guard, weaving past families in waiting rooms, past the vending machines that never worked right. Outside Patricia's room, I slowed down. I could hear voices inside, a woman's voice, calm and professional. Then Patricia's, thin and breathy, like paper being rubbed together. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, I was just there. Patricia said, quiet but sharp, like she didn't want anyone to miss her point. You just need the authorization on file. Don't let him see the details. He'll sign whatever Danielle puts in front of him. He's only the name on it. The nurse murmured something I couldn't catch. Patricia answered right away. That's why we do it this way. He thinks he's helping. That's all he needs to think. My hand tightened around the paper bag until the handles dug into my fingers. For a few seconds, my body stayed still while my mind raced. Heat rose up the back of my neck, then dropped straight into my stomach. I could have pushed the door open right then. I could have demanded answers, but a lifetime of practice kept my face steady. In my line of work, panic gets people killed. You learn how to keep your voice level, even when everything inside you wants to blow apart. So I turned away like I hadn't heard a thing. My shoes squeaked faintly against the polished floor as I walked down the hall. I passed a family arguing near the elevators, a man holding a sleeping baby, a woman wiping tears off her cheeks. Life kept moving around me while something in mine cracked. I made it to the parking garage and stood beside my truck, the concrete warm under my boots. The air smelled like exhaust and disinfectant. I leaned one shoulder against the door and stared at nothing. All those years I'd told myself I was being patient. All those times I'd said, it's not worth the fight. It hit me then. Quiet doesn't always mean strong. Sometimes it just means convenient. Sometimes it means everyone else gets to write the rules. I pulled out my phone, opened our joint account, and started scrolling through the transactions, one after another. Transfers, withdrawals, payments I didn't recognize. My thumb kept moving while my chest went tight, and I stood there in that garage like I just walked out of a fire and didn't realize my clothes were still smoking. My thumb kept scrolling until the screen blurred. A few minutes later, I forced myself to stop and locked the phone. Staying in that garage staring at numbers wasn't going to fix anything. I got in the truck, drove home, and acted like I was still the same man who'd left that morning. Danielle was in the kitchen when I walked in. She didn't look up. She had a pot going, one hand on her hip, the other tapping at her phone. "Did you sign the papers?" she asked. I set the grocery bags on the counter, one by one. Which papers? That made her pause, just for a second. Then she went back to stirring like nothing happened. Mom's authorization. They need it. You know that. I need to see what I'm signing. Her spoon froze mid-stir. Danielle turned her head slowly, eyes narrow, like she was trying to decide whether I was joking. Malcolm, don't do this right now. I didn't raise my voice, didn't slam anything. I just stood there with my hands on the counter and waited. She sighed and shifted into that tone she used when she wanted to end a conversation without actually answering it. She's sick. You're making this harder than it has to be. I let it go. Not because I agreed, but because my son came in right then, backpack hanging off one shoulder, talking about some science project. I kissed his forehead, asked him about his day, and listened like everything was fine. Later, after he went to his room, I picked up the mail from the table. There was a thick envelope from the bank I hadn't opened, another from our insurance provider, a notice from a medical billing department. Danielle usually handled those. She always said, "It's easier if one person does it." And I always believed her because I didn't want to micromanage my own marriage. That night, while she showered, I slid the envelopes into my work bag without making noise. I took my phone to the garage again and started comparing dates. Small transfers that added up. Payments to places I didn't recognize. A couple of cash withdrawals that didn't match our normal spending. It wasn't the kind of stealing you notice right away. It was the kind that hides in plain sight because you're too busy trusting. The next day at the station, I did my job. Checked the rigs, went over safety, ran drills with the younger guys, joked around at lunch. Nobody would have guessed my mind kept circling the same thought like it couldn't find a place to land. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe I heard wrong. Maybe Patricia meant something else. Then my phone started ringing. Danielle's cousin first. A quick, "Hey man," that wasn't really friendly. More like a warning dressed up as concern. "How's Aunt Pat doing?" he asked. "She's hanging in there. They say the bills are piling up. You good over there?" I told him we were handling it. He laughed like he didn't believe me. After that, her sister called. Then her aunt. Same questions, same pressure, like they'd all gotten the same script. By the third call, I realized what was happening. Word was spreading that I was dragging my feet, that I was holding back, that I was the reason Patricia was suffering. I didn't argue. People like that don't want truth. They want a target. That afternoon, I went back to the hospital, not with tea and pajamas, but with a folder. I headed straight to the records desk. A woman in navy scrubs stood behind the counter, hair pulled into a neat bun, reading glasses perched low on her nose. Her badge said, Elena Ruiz, nurse case manager. She looked up and gave me a small, tired smile. "Mr. Jordan?" She said it like she already knew my name. "That's me." She pulled a file toward her and tapped the top page with her fingernail. "I'm going to be direct, because you look like a man who doesn't have time for dancing around things." I didn't flinch. I just nodded. Elena lowered her voice. "There are documents on your mother-in-law's account with a signature that matches yours, but according to our records, you weren't here the day they were submitted." My throat went dry. What does that mean? Elena held my gaze, steady and calm. It means someone signed your name, or used your information, and if you don't address it, the hospital will assume you approved it. I stood there with my hands on the counter, hearing the noise of the lobby around us, but not really registering any of it. All I could think was how easy it would have been to keep quiet, keep paying, keep being the reliable one, and how nobody was going to protect me if I didn't do it myself. Elena's words followed me all the way home, not in a dramatic way, more like a loose nail you can't stop feeling every time you move. I kept hearing the same thing in my head, signatures that matched mine, and I wasn't there. I waited until the house settled into its normal evening rhythm. My son at the dining table, bent over his homework, tapping his pencil like he was keeping time with his thoughts. Daniel moving around the kitchen, opening cabinets, closing them too hard, the way she did when she wanted attention, but didn't want to ask for it. I didn't confront her right away. I went to the bedroom, pulled out my laptop, and logged into every account I could think of. Banking, insurance, email. I searched by keywords first. Hospital, Patricia, authorization. Then I started scanning dates. That's when I saw it. A series of transfers, small enough to slip under the radar if you weren't watching closely. A few hundred here, 800 there, always from our joint account. always going to the same place, Coleman Care, LLC. I stared at it for a long time, trying to place the name. Maybe it was some home health agency. Maybe it was a billing company the hospital used. Maybe Danielle had told me and I'd forgotten. So I searched again. Google, state registration records, anything. The company existed. The address was local. The name on the filing made my stomach tighten. Patricia Coleman, my mother-in-law. I sat back in the chair and let the silence fill up the room. That part didn't hurt the most. People set up companies all the time. Some do it for taxes, some do it for convenience. What hit me was the pattern. She'd been getting money from us regularly, quietly, like a paycheck, like an entitlement. And I realized I couldn't remember a single moment where anyone had sat down and said, "Here's what we're paying, here's why, here's where it goes." It had always been assumed. I closed the laptop and walked back to the kitchen like nothing changed. That's how I've always handled trouble. You don't let the panic run the show. You move slow. You gather facts. You don't tip your hand until you know what you're holding. My son was still working. Danielle was cutting vegetables, her knife hitting the board with quick, irritated thumps. I kept my voice light. "Hey, I saw a name in our bank history. Coleman Care. What is that?" The knife stopped mid-slice. Danielle didn't look at me at first. She kept her eyes on the cutting board, like she could pretend she didn't hear. "It's just for Mom," she said. "What does it pay for?" That made her turn. Her face tightened fast, like I'd insulted her without realizing it. A sharpness came into her eyes that didn't match the simple question I'd asked. "Why are you digging into this?" she snapped. I stayed calm. "Because it's our account," she scoffed. "Malcolm, I can't believe you're doing this right now. I'm asking, that's all." Danielle's mouth opened, then closed. Her shoulders lifted like she was bracing for impact. Then, like flipping a switch, her expression shifted. Her eyes filled. Her voice dropped into a tremble. "My mom is in the hospital, and you're sitting here acting like she's some stranger trying to steal from us." The words came out practiced, like she'd said them before. Maybe not to me, but somewhere, to someone. My son glanced up from his homework, confused by the change in tone. "Dad?" he said softly. I forced a smile at him. "You're good, buddy. Finish that worksheet." He looked between us for a second, then lowered his head again, pretending not to hear. Danielle wiped at her face and shook her head like I'd broken her heart. "You're making this about money, about paperwork, when it's about family." I didn't argue. I didn't accuse her. I didn't even raise my voice. Instead, I pulled my phone out of my pocket and turned on the voice memo app without her seeing. I slid it face down on the counter. "I'm not trying to fight," I said. "I just want clarity." "You want clarity?" Danielle laughed through tears. "Fine. It's for Mom's care. For things insurance doesn't cover. What do you want me to say?" "I want to see the invoices." The crying stopped. That silence was louder than any shouting could have been. Danielle stared at me like she was seeing a stranger in her kitchen. "What's wrong with you?" I didn't answer. I picked up my phone again, turned the recording off, and walked to the living room. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight, like my body knew something my mind was still catching up to. That night, after everyone went to bed, I changed the passwords on my personal accounts. Not the joint one, not yet. Just mine. Then I opened a new folder on my laptop and started saving everything. Screenshots, emails, bank statements, names, dates. In the morning, I was brushing my teeth when Danielle walked into the bathroom holding her phone. "Did you change your banking password?" The way she asked it wasn't curious. It was accusing. And she kept looking at me like I'd done something unforgivable. Danielle held her phone up like a badge. "Did you change your banking password?" Foam dripped off my toothbrush. I stared at myself in the mirror for a second, then spit, rinsed, and set the brush down. "Yeah," I said, "my personal account." "Why?" Her tone wasn't confused. It was offended, like I'd locked her out of something she owned. "Because it's mine." Danielle's eyes narrowed. She stepped closer into the doorway, blocking the exit like she didn't even realize she was doing it. "Are you hiding something?" That one made me let out a short breath. Not a laugh. More like air escaping because holding it in was getting tiring. "I'm protecting myself," I said. "There's a difference." She stared at me, jaw tight, and I could see her deciding what to do next. Danielle didn't like conversation she couldn't control. If she couldn't win with logic, she switched to emotion. If that didn't work, she went to pressure. We drove to the hospital that afternoon. She didn't talk much on the way, just tapped her nails against the armrest and stared out the window like she was building a case. Texas Medical Center was busy, like always. People in wheelchairs, families hovering, nurses moving fast. Danielle walked ahead of me, purposeful, like she wanted everyone to see she was the one in charge. When we got to the waiting area near Patricia's floor, I saw more people than I expected. Her sister, Angela, 2 cousins I barely knew, an aunt who had never once come to my house but somehow had opinions about my marriage. Even Patricia's pastor was there, sitting with his hands folded, looking like he'd been invited for moral support. Danielle's eyes flicked toward them, then back to me. That's when I understood. This wasn't a visit, it was a setup. Patricia was in a wheelchair by the nurse's station, a blanket across her lap like she was fragile, like she couldn't harm a fly. She spotted me and immediately put on that tired, suffering face. "There he is," she said loudly. Finally. Heads turned. I kept my posture steady. In my job, you learn to walk into rooms where everyone's upset and not let it throw you. This was just a different kind of fire. Daniel reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of papers. She waved them like she was holding a solution. "The doctor says Mom needs this signed today," she announced, and her voice carried. A few people nodded, murmuring like a chorus. Patricia leaned forward, eyes sharp despite the weak act. "He's been refusing," she said, acting like we're asking for the moon. My stomach stayed calm, but something inside my chest tightened. Not fear. Something closer to disgust. I glanced at the top page. It wasn't just hospital consent. It looked like financial authorization, responsibility for charges, release of information, power of attorney language buried in small print. "I'm not refusing," I said. "I'm reading." Danielle scoffed. "It's standard, Malcolm." Patricia raised her voice a notch. "A real man doesn't need paperwork to take care of his family." That line hit the room like a thrown brick. Even the nurse at the desk paused. Conversations nearby went quiet. People waited to see what I would do, whether I'd snap, whether I'd fold. I didn't give them either. "I'm not signing anything until I review it with someone who understands it," I said evenly. "I'll respond in writing." Angela's mouth fell open. "You're really doing this? In front of your wife? In front of your sick mother-in-law?" Danielle's eyes glistened, right on cue. "I can't believe you're humiliating us," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. My hands stayed at my sides. The temptation to defend myself was strong. But defending yourself in a mob is like arguing with smoke. It just spreads. So I turned my head toward the nurse. "Can I get copies of everything that requires my signature?" I asked. The nurse blinked, then nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." Patricia's lips tightened. For a second, the mask slipped. I saw the irritation underneath, the entitlement. "You think you're so smart," she snapped. "You think you're above us." I didn't answer her. I took the copies, tucked them into my folder, and walked away with Danielle following behind, her heels clicking fast, angry. In the elevator, she hissed, "You made me look stupid." "You brought an audience," I said quietly. "That was your choice." She shook her head like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You're not acting like yourself." I didn't tell her that I was. This was me. Just the version of me she hadn't been able to use yet. That evening, back at the station, I checked my phone between calls and saw a notification from the bank. Credit limit alert. My card, under my name, had been pushed close to max. Several charges tied to medical services, some pending, some processed. My throat tightened as I scrolled. A lieutenant can't carry debt like that. Not quietly. Not without questions. Background checks, promotions, clearance, it all matters. I sat on the edge of the bunkroom bench, staring at the screen while the guys joked in the next room. Then I opened my contacts and searched for a number I'd never thought I'd need. A lawyer. The next morning, Elena texted me from a number I didn't save. "If you can meet today, I can show you what I'm allowed to share. Midtown, 2 o'clock. I went straight after shift, still in plain clothes, still carrying that tight feeling in my chest like a weight I couldn't set down. The diner she chose was the kind of place that didn't pretend to be anything else. Older booths, scratched tables, regulars drinking coffee like it was medicine. Elena stood when I walked in. No drama, no pity, just a quick nod like we were 2 adults handling a problem. "Thanks for coming," she said. We slid into a booth. A waitress poured coffee without asking. Elena waited until the waitress walked away, then reached into her bag and pulled out a thin folder. "I can't give you everything," she said, voice low, "but I can show you enough for you to protect yourself." She laid out copies, insurance forms, authorization pages, a medical power of attorney document. My name was printed on all of them. My signature was on the bottom, and I knew, the same way I know a man's pulse when I touch his wrist, that it wasn't mine. The loops were too smooth, the pressure wrong. The way the J curved, close but not natural, like someone studied it. "That date," Elena said, tapping the corner. "According to our system, you weren't in the building. Your badge never scanned in. Your car wasn't registered in the garage." I swallowed hard. "I was on shift." Elena nodded. "I figured. Listen, I've seen families do a lot when they're scared. But I've also seen people get buried under someone else's decisions. If you don't lock this down, it's going to spread." I sat there, staring at the paper. Part of me wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation, a clerical error, a misunderstanding. But there was a company in Patricia's name, transfers from my account, and now forged signatures. Elena didn't push. She just watched me quietly, like she understood that men like me don't break loud. We break inward. When I got back to my truck, my phone was buzzing. Danielle, a missed call, then another, then a message. "Why is your captain asking if you're okay? People are saying you're acting unstable." My stomach tightened again, not from fear this time, from clarity. She was reaching outward now, past me, into my reputation, into the one place I couldn't afford chaos. I drove to Herman Park after that and parked under the trees, engine off, windows up. I opened my laptop on the passenger seat, pulled up every screenshot, every email, every statement I'd saved. One folder became 2, then 3. Names, dates, proof. By the time the sun dipped low, my phone had stopped ringing. I didn't call Danielle back. Instead, I typed one short email to the lawyer whose number I'd saved the night before, attached the first batch of documents, and stared at the screen until the cursor blinked like it was waiting on me. The lawyer replied the next morning while I was still at the station. "Malcolm, I can see you have a serious issue here. Come in today if you can." I read it twice, then tucked my phone away and finished my shift like normal. No shaking hands, no scattered thoughts, just checklists and routine. That's what I did when a building was burning. Focus on the next step, not the noise. After I clocked out, I drove downtown and parked near his office. The building was clean and plain, the kind of place where problems walked in messy and walked out organized. He was a black man about my age, sharp suit, calm eyes. His name was Darnell Hayes. He shook my hand and didn't ask how I was holding up, which I appreciated more than I expected. "Tell me the facts," he said. I opened my folder and laid it out piece by piece. Statements, transfers, the Coleman Care paperwork, the copies Elena had shown me, the audio recordings from my kitchen. Darnell didn't interrupt. He just read, nodded, made notes. "Okay," he said finally. "We're going to do this clean. No shouting matches. No emotional emails. We build a record." He slid a legal pad toward me. "Step 1. Separate accounts. Step 2. Notify the bank about suspected fraud. Step 3. Document your work schedule so nobody can claim you signed those papers in person. Step 4. Don't sign anything else. Not a single page." I nodded. That was language I understood. A plan, a sequence, clear boundaries. From there, I went straight to a notary. Small office, quick service. The woman behind the desk had me sign my name 3 times, slowly, on official forms. She stamped them and handed me copies. My signature. Verified. The next stop was my bank. I sat across from a manager and kept my voice even while I explained what I needed. "I want alerts on any transaction above $200. I want my credit line frozen until this gets resolved. And I want a fraud report opened on anything tied to medical billing." The manager raised his eyebrows. "That's a lot, Mr. Jordan." "It's necessary." He didn't argue after that. He printed paperwork, walked me through the steps, and gave me a case number. When I left, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not relief, control. That night, Danielle tried a different approach. She cooked my favorite meal like nothing had happened. She asked about my day in a voice that sounded softer than usual. She even laughed at something my son said, the kind of laugh that used to make me forget we ever fought. I ate, I listened. I didn't give her anything. After my son went to bed, Danielle leaned against the counter and watched me rinse my plate. "Who are you talking to?" she asked. "Work stuff. Work doesn't make you change passwords." I kept my eyes on the sink. "I'm handling some things." Her tone sharpened. "Are you seeing someone?" That made me pause, not because it hurt, because it showed where her mind was. She couldn't imagine I was protecting myself. She could only imagine I was betraying her. "No," I said, "don't do that." Danielle crossed her arms. "Then what are you doing?" I turned the water off and faced her. "I'm making sure my name doesn't get used again without my permission." Her face stiffened. For a moment, she looked like she might snap. Then she swallowed it back. "You're acting paranoid, Malcolm." I didn't answer. I picked up my phone, walked past her, and went into the living room. Later that night, a number I didn't recognize called me twice. I let it ring out. A third time came around 1 in the morning. Still no voicemail. 2 days after that, I noticed a dark sedan parked down the street from our house longer than it needed to be. Maybe it belonged to a neighbor. Maybe it didn't. When I stepped outside, it rolled forward slowly, then turned the corner. Danielle started watching me the way you watch a locked door when you can't find the key. Her eyes followed my hands. Her questions came sharper. Her silence grew heavier. I didn't react. I kept collecting, kept saving, kept sending updates to Darnell. And every night, after everyone went to sleep, I sat at the dining table with my laptop open, adding one more document to the file while the house stayed quiet around me. The school meeting was supposed to be simple. A quick check-in with my son's teachers, go over his grades, talk about his focus in class, then head home. I got there straight from work, still smelling faintly like station coffee and diesel. My son walked beside me, talking about a project he wanted to build for science fair, hands moving like he could already see it finished. We stepped into the conference room, and his homeroom teacher smiled. "Mr. Jordan, thanks for coming." I sat down, leaned forward, listened. She mentioned he was doing well, but he'd been distracted lately. I nodded. That part didn't surprise me. Kids feel tension, even when you try to hide it. Then the door opened. Danielle walked in like she had every right to be there, even though she hadn't told me she was coming. Her eyes were already shiny. Her shoulders were hunched, like she'd been crying in the parking lot just to get into character. "I'm sorry," she said, voice shaky. I didn't know who else to talk to." The teacher looked confused. I stayed still. Danielle turned toward the teacher, not toward me. "He's under a lot of stress," she said, wiping her cheek. "Malcolm. He's been talking about leaving, about walking away. I'm scared he's going to abandon us." The word abandon hung in the air like smoke. My son froze beside my chair. His face went blank. His hand reached for my sleeve without thinking. I put my palm on his shoulder. Gentle, firm. "Danielle," I said quietly, "this isn't the place." She shook her head, still not looking at me. "I'm begging you, please. If anything seems off when he picks our son up, could you just keep an eye on it? Make sure he's okay?" The teacher blinked fast, clearly uncomfortable. A counselor sitting in the corner shifted in her chair. I felt every eye in the room turn toward me like I was a stranger, a dangerous man. I didn't argue, didn't defend myself. My voice wouldn't have mattered anyway. Danielle wasn't trying to tell the truth. She was trying to plant doubt. So I stood up slowly, keeping my hand on my son's shoulder so he wouldn't feel like he was falling. "We're done here," I said. Danielle let out a small sob, like I'd just proven her point. I walked my son out without another word. In the hallway, he looked up at me, eyes wide. "Dad, are you leaving?" That question landed harder than any insult Patricia had ever thrown at me. I crouched so we were eye level. "No," I said. "Never you, understand?" He nodded, but he didn't look convinced. He clung to my hand all the way to the car. By the time I got back to work, my phone buzzed with a bank alert. College fund withdrawal, $7,500, authorized by electronic signature. My breath caught. That account was supposed to be locked. That was his future. Tuition, books, housing, a chance to start life without chains. I called the number attached to the alert and got routed to a fraud department. While I waited on hold, my hand stayed steady, but my jaw felt sore from how hard I'd clenched it. After the call, I drove straight to Texas Medical Center. Not up to Patricia's floor, not to the waiting room, to the parking garage. The same place where I'd first stood alone and scrolled through lies. Danielle was already there. She must have followed my location or guessed. Either way, she stepped toward me like she planned to talk me down. "Malcolm, please." I raised a hand, not aggressive, just enough to stop her. My voice stayed low. "I know what you did. I know what your mother did. And from now on, you don't speak to me about money, documents, or my son without my attorney." Danielle's mouth opened. Her eyes flashed, then softened, then flashed again, like she was searching for the right mask. I didn't wait to see which one she chose. I walked past her, pulled my phone out, and sent Darnell one short message with the withdrawal amount and the timestamp. "Darnell called me before I even made it home. I saw your message. Don't touch that account again. Don't try to fix it yourself. Let the bank and the paper trail do their job. I already opened a fraud claim," I said. "Good. Now we add this to the file." His voice stayed calm, like he was talking me through a controlled burn. No panic, no drama, just steps. The next day, Elena reached out again. "I need to tell you something. It's important." I met her outside the records office, away from the main desk. She looked tired, like she'd been dealing with too many families who thought fear gave them permission to lie. "We flagged the medical power of attorney submission," she said. "IT pulled the log data." I didn't speak. I just waited. Elena exhaled and kept her voice quiet. "The form was submitted from an IP address that matches your home Wi-Fi. Same network, same router." My stomach turned, not because I didn't believe her, but because it was worse than I'd expected. They hadn't just used my name, they'd used my house, my couch, my kitchen table, the same place my son ate cereal and did homework. They turned my home into their office for fraud. "Can you print that?" I asked. "I can give you a report summary with the timestamp," she said. "It won't say your house, but it will show the IP match. And that's enough for your attorney." She handed me the paper in a sealed envelope, like she was passing a weapon across a table. Later that afternoon, I sat in a small office at the bank with a fraud specialist named Kevin. White guy, early 30s, polite but serious. He didn't care about family dynamics. He cared about what could be proven. He pulled up my account history, the credit line alerts, the withdrawal from my son's college fund. "Mr. Jordan," he said, tapping his pen on the desk, "if there's forged authorization and electronic signature abuse, this isn't a personal disagreement. It's criminal behavior." The word criminal didn't shock me. It clarified something. Danielle and Patricia had been hiding behind family because family made people hesitate. Family made you second-guess yourself. Family made you worry about looking cruel. Paperwork didn't care about any of that. I left the bank with more case numbers, printed reports, and instructions. I also left with a strange kind of calm. Not peace, more like a switch had flipped inside me. That evening, Danielle tried to corner me again. She waited until my son was in the shower. Then she stood in the hallway, arms folded, eyes red like she'd been practicing. "You're trying to destroy my mother," she said. I walked past her to the bedroom without stopping. "Malcolm," she snapped, voice rising. "You're not even listening." I turned just enough to look at her. "I'm listening. I'm just not negotiating." Her lips trembled. She stepped closer, like she was going to grab my arm. "You don't understand what she's been through." "I understand what she's done," I said, and kept moving. In the bedroom, I opened my laptop and laid out the pieces in front of me. Coleman Care LLC, unauthorized hospital documents, my signature, copied, my IP address, used, my son's money, stolen, my credit, stretched. Every road led back to the same place, and for the first time, I wasn't thinking about how to make them stop. I was thinking about how to end it clean. Darnell scheduled the meeting for a Thursday at 10. He told me not to negotiate the time, not to argue about the location, and not to explain anything beyond the basics. "They show up or they don't," he said. "Either way, we move forward." So I sent Danielle one text. "Be at Darnell Hayes' office downtown at 10 a.m. Your mother, too." She called right away. I didn't answer. A minute later, another text came through. "What is this? Why are you doing this?" I left it on read. When I walked into Darnell's office, he had everything ready. A conference room with a long table, a small recorder placed in plain sight, and 2 folders stacked neatly like they'd been waiting all week for this moment. Darnell looked at me once. "You good?" Yeah, that was the truth. Not because it didn't hurt, because I'd already accepted what it was. Danielle arrived first. She stepped in wearing a blazer like she was going to a job interview. Hair done, makeup perfect. The moment she saw the recorder, her face tightened. "Are you recording me?" she asked. Darnell didn't blink. "We are recording the meeting, yes. Everyone will be informed." Danielle's eyes snapped to me. "Malcolm, this is insane." I didn't respond. Patricia came in a few minutes later in a wheelchair Danielle pushed, even though I knew Patricia could walk. She wore a scarf around her neck and a small cross necklace resting on her chest. The performance was careful, fragile, sweet, wronged. Patricia looked around the room and then fixed her eyes on me. "So this is what you've come to," she said, dragging us into some office like criminals. Darnell gestured toward the chair. "Please have a seat, Miss Coleman. We're here to clarify legal responsibilities and address evidence of unauthorized activity." Patricia scoffed. "Evidence? That's the problem with you men these days. You don't have morals. You don't have loyalty. You only have papers." She leaned forward, voice rising. "You married my daughter. You took on this family. Now you want to act like we're strangers because money got tight?" Danielle stepped in fast, tears already loading in her eyes. "Mom, please," she said, then turned to me. "Why are you doing this to her? She's sick." Patricia threw her hands up like she couldn't believe the betrayal. "He doesn't care about me," she said. "He never did. He just wants an excuse to leave and not look like the bad guy." I watched them, both of them, working the same angle they always used. Shame him, corner him, make him prove he's not cruel. That used to work because I cared what people thought of me, because I didn't want to be the man who abandoned anyone, especially a sick woman. But in the last few weeks, they'd taken more than my patience. They'd reached into my name, my home, my son. Darnell slid one folder toward me. "Mr. Jordan, whenever you're ready." I opened it and pulled out the notarized signature samples first. I didn't speak. I just placed them on the table. Then I set down the forged versions beside them. Danielle blinked hard. Patricia's lips pressed together. Next came the bank statements showing the steady transfers to Coleman Care LLC. Then the business registration with Patricia's name on it. Then the college fund withdrawal, time-stamped, authorized under a digital signature that wasn't mine. I watched Danielle's face shift as she recognized each piece. Patricia tried to keep her chin lifted, but her eyes moved too fast now, scanning like she was looking for a way out. Darnell put the hospital log report on top. "This is an IT audit summary from Texas Medical Center," he said. "It shows the medical power of attorney was submitted from an IP address matching Mr. Jordan's home network." Patricia's mouth opened. That's not..." Darnell raised a hand, cutting her off without heat. "And this," he continued, "is the bank's fraud case initiation. If we submit these documents, along with the timeline of Mr. Jordan's work shifts, it will trigger an investigation into forged signatures, unauthorized transfers, and potential insurance fraud." Danielle made a soft sound, like the air had left her lungs. Patricia's face changed. The color drained. The cross necklace suddenly looked less like faith and more like a prop. "You wouldn't do that to family," she whispered. I finally spoke. "You did it to me first." The room went quiet. No crying now, no moral speeches, no audience to perform for, just paper and consequences. Darnell leaned back in his chair. "Ms. Coleman, Ms. Jordan, you have a choice. Cooperate in returning funds and signing corrective documentation, or we proceed with formal filings and law enforcement referrals." Patricia stared at me like she wanted to curse me, but didn't want it on record. Danielle's mascara had smudged, but she didn't wipe it. She just looked down at the table, like she was seeing the damage for the first time. I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and slid my chair back. No victory speech, no threat. I walked out of the conference room and headed toward the elevator, while my phone buzzed in my pocket with a message from the bank asking me to confirm the next step on the fraud report. The elevator doors opened on the ground floor, and I stepped out with my phone still buzzing. The bank rep was asking for confirmation to move forward with the fraud investigation. I typed one word: Yes. Then I put the phone away and drove back to the station. A call came in on the radio halfway there, and I went right into work mode like I always did. Helmet on, gloves tight, eyes forward. I didn't talk about my marriage. I didn't talk about Patricia. I didn't tell anyone I was watching my life split in two. A week later, Danielle's attorney sent paperwork. Darnell handled it. I read every page, signed what I needed to sign, and left the rest untouched until he explained it line by line. The divorce wasn't loud, no screaming in court, no fighting in the driveway, just documents moving through offices like paperwork always does, steady and indifferent. Darnell had me open a new account for my son's college fund, one only I could access. We transferred every remaining dollar out of the old one and set up restrictions so no electronic signature could touch it without my approval. I also changed the beneficiary details and added an extra layer of verification, two-factor, phone call confirmation, the kind of protection I should have put in place years ago. After that, Darnell drafted a formal notice. No authorization, no permission to use my name, my information, my insurance, or my signature. He sent it to Danielle. He sent it to Patricia. He sent it to the hospital and the bank. It was one of the strangest feelings of my life, watching boundaries appear on paper. Like I'd been living in a house without locks, and someone finally installed them. The consequences came in quiet waves. Texas Medical Center froze Patricia's medical authorization until the investigation finished. Her case manager called Danielle directly, not me. Patricia couldn't make decisions the way she used to. She couldn't swing my name like a key. The bank flagged Coleman Care LLC transactions and began reversing what they could. They asked questions Danielle couldn't cry her way out of. They requested identification, signatures, explanations. They started pulling records. A fraud investigator left me a voicemail asking for a formal statement. I met them downtown, told the truth, and signed what they put in front of me. The report wasn't dramatic. It was detailed, calm, and permanent. Patricia's pastor called me once. "Son," he said, "I know your heart. I know you want peace." I didn't argue with him. He didn't need to know my heart. He needed to understand my line. "I'm not at war," I said. "I'm just not carrying this anymore." He didn't call again. Danielle tried, though. She showed up one evening while my son was at basketball practice. She stood on the porch like she belonged there, eyes red, hands shaking like she was holding herself together. "Malcolm, please. We can fix this." I didn't invite her inside. "The paperwork will go through Darnell," I said. She took a step forward, voice cracking. "You're really going to throw away everything?" I looked at her for a long moment. Not with hatred, not even anger, just recognition. "You already did," I said, and closed the door. After the divorce finalized, I took my son down to Galveston Beach on a Sunday afternoon. Not a big trip, just a drive, some sandwiches, and an excuse to breathe without anyone pulling on me. He ran ahead near the water, shoes in his hands, laughing when the waves chased him. I watched him and felt that familiar urge to apologize for the world, to explain why adults do what they do. Instead, I stayed quiet. We sat on the sand and ate, and he leaned against my shoulder like he used to when he was little. The sun started dropping, and I didn't feel happy exactly. I felt clean. No shouting in my head, no guilt forcing me to bend, no fear that my name could be used like a tool. My phone stayed in my pocket. The ocean kept moving, and for the first time in a long time, so did I.